This is Target Score Weekly with Joey Slattery and Taylor Allen. Welcome into episode 9. Kind of a milestone. Weird number to be a milestone. But Taylor Allen, it is a milestone for Target Score Weekly because we have a very, very special guest joining us this week. I will let you do the honors to tell everybody who it is.
Get out the salami and cheese, mama. Chuck Swirsky, the former voice of the Toronto Raptors, now the voice of the Chicago Bulls, and the Canadian Elite Basketball League as well. Chuck Swirsky on the show. Joey and I, obviously, we grew up listening to his calls and whatnot, so actually getting a chance to speak with him was something I never imagined I'd get the chance to do. I could have asked him probably 1,000 questions, but with the time we had, we squeezed in as much as we could. But yeah, man, that was a fun one.
He was very generous with his time, man. That was it was a great conversation. That's coming up very shortly, and a pretty good way to cap off officially the CEBL season. Quebec City held the clash in Quebec City between the Eastern Conference, Western Conference. Western Conference came away as champs. Really well attended. I think it was like 7,000 people. It looked pretty fun in there. That arena reminds me a lot like the Videotron Center of Winnipeg. And as we talked about before, it looks like that is going to be a market that the CEBL will have a team soon enough. And they showed out for a team that wasn't theirs. So it'd be interesting to see once they get their own team. Chuck even alludes to that, just to give a little tease about the rivalries that it would create from coast to coast, essentially. So yeah, it was good to see the turnout in Quebec City. We had talked about it. We would have liked to have seen maybe the All Stars, but we it's kind of like the best of whoever was left kind of thing. But it was still a good game.
Are you saying AJ Hess is not an all-star? Joey Slattery?
Hey, man, he had 15 points in that game, so maybe he is, right? Best of the rest.
Yeah. That's kind of funny. Felt like for weeks we've been saying, man, we need more from AJ Hess. Just even the 15 points here and there would be good. And then sure enough, he ends the season
with a 15 I think he's 3 for 9 from 3-point land, but yeah.
Okay, well, he's still AJ Hess then. But.
No Glenn Yang there either. I know that disappointed you as well. Teddy wasn't there, EJ off to their own team. So it's tough, right? We talked about this, the way the schedule works. But Chuck Swirsky was there. It was a bang-up broadcast. They did a great job, as they always do. Chuck's been, as you said, the voice of the Raptors, now the voice of the Bulls, and he's the national voice of the CEBL this year with on TSN. Calling games from coast to coast, which he hasn't really done, right? As a Toronto Raptors announcer, your viewers are across the country, but he actually got to visit all the big markets across the country this year. Well, missing a few, obviously, but he got to see a good part of this country, and he was a spectacle himself everywhere he went. This guy loves basketball, and he loves Canada. Like, that's one thing I've taken away from this. He's a Canadian citizen.
That's how much he loves it,
right? And he did not treat this as a second tier game when he was coming out. Like, you got NBA level Chuck Swirsky. This wasn't a summer vacation. Like, he put in the work. When he was in Winnipeg at morning shoot around, I saw it for myself, the work that he puts in and the interviews that he does. And there's a reason why he's, as successful as he is in this sport and why he's so beloved. And I think after this interview, Taylor, people are going to love him maybe even a little bit more if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. But, last week with Teddy Allen, the MVP on the show, we've officially made it, Joey, because we got a little bit of hate on Twitter. Someone reaching out saying, had to wait 18 minutes to listen to the Teddy Allen interview. Shelly, it's okay. Whatever. I get that. I mean, I'll be honest. Quite often when I listen to podcasts and they have a guest I'm really excited to hear, I'll totally skip the entire intro.
Yeah, well, we know where
sometimes,
we stand,
not,
right?
Not all the time. So, fair enough.
That's the thing. We know. This is just us talking. There's no one listening, and they go right through us. And, we know where we are in the totem pole on our own show. And that's fine. If I have to take a back seat to allow guys, like Teddy Allen and Chuck Swirsky, if I have to step back to let them have their light, I mean, I have to do what I have to do. I'm a team player, Taylor, and you are too. You're the towel waver. I'm there with you. We're waving the towel, wanting the people to be their best, right? And hey, it brings us success, so we love it.
There you go. We're the 11th and 12th men, end of the bench.
I also wonder if that person was saying, like, hey, for people not from Winnipeg, because we're noticing huge growth in other areas, we're saying, hey, for people that are from a place that Teddy Allen's played, this is where the part you care about's at. But either way, we love it, man. Share away. tell your friends, tell everybody, and have them join and have a watch party or a listening party. Just do what you got to do. We just love that we've been getting the interaction and everybody's been enjoying it. And we have plenty to go. As we said, we're going to try and keep this going throughout the winter. Talk a little Canada basketball, because I want to touch on that real quick. Team Canada, hello. Man, are they killing it. They opened with a 30-point win on France and then set a whole bunch of records. Right?
That's not. They're no slouch, man. They got NBA talent. They're always kind of in the thick of it, and to beat them by 30. This is a new era. This is a new era.
On Winnipeg Sports Talk earlier this week, I said that that was France right here and Canada saying, okay, no, now we're the world power. Like, we are tier 1 on global basketball, and like in a big way. And I think they broke France. I think France is broken basketball wise, because then they go and lose to Latvia. They're done. They're done.
Did you hear what Nick Batum said? I think he said he's nervous to go back to France because they're embarrassed of their showing at the World Cup. So probably isn't that bad, there, Nick. I'm sure he can still go back home. But yeah, like, just think, 10, 15 years ago, whenever, even 5 years ago, the thought of smacking a team like France by 30 was just out of the question. Like,
even this year, I wasn't expecting that. Like, I was hoping that they'd win. Like, I don't think I ever thought for a second, like, it's in the bag. I thought they have a really good chance of winning and maybe like a 10-point, but 30 points. And then they go and lose to Latvia. And they had the last shot too. So Latvia suddenly, with a chance to pull off something crazy. But like, this was recorded before the game. Canada's playing Latvia on the Tuesday morning. So that game has not happened yet as of this recording. But either way, Canada looking poised to have an Olympic run, man. This is going to be a fun time to follow the national basketball program. And I'm very much looking forward to the Olympics coming up in 24, maybe more than any other Summer Olympics before it.
I agree 1 billion%. If we can get our team, if we can get all these guys that are playing this World Cup and a couple more, maybe an Andrew Wiggins, right. Jamal Murray, obviously, he just came off of NBA championship. He's got to take care of his body, so fair enough. But if we could just get a couple more guys, and maybe the USA doesn't send their absolute, A team, anything's possible. Canada, USA, gold medal. Oh my goodness, that would be the greatest sporting event of our lifetimes, I think. Well, like, honestly, I'd be that hyped up for that.
I feel like we're inching towards, and I'm not comparing them to the dream team, but like in terms of the impact here in Canada, like this could be Canada's dream team in the sense that, can compete for a medal at the Olympics. That was just so far off the radar for so many years. We've had great players come and go through the program, but never this many at once. Right. And the cool thing about this, Taylor, is that we're getting to watch players. And I think we might have talked about this on other episodes. You and I have talked about it, but Gilgeous-Alexander, he is a guy that I don't get to watch too much because he's playing out in Oklahoma City. So unless you have NBA League Pass, and as guys that work a lot of nights covering other sports, like, I miss a lot of the games. Like, I can only watch the Celtics and then, the Raptors, really. So I don't get to see a lot of these guys unless they're the national game of the week. And they do get it, but not as much as like, the Denvers and the Lakers and the Celtics and things like that. So it's been kind of cool to see some of these guys and being able to cheer for them like full front, right? Like, these are, now I'm cheering for them as on the team as well, not just for them like personally, because they're playing for the country. And that's been a really, really cool thing about this tournament so far too. So, I mean, I'm already stoked and I can't wait for now the Olympics. Like, once that comes around and Canada's in there and, competing for a medal, like, it's hard. Once this tournament moves forward to see other teams.
We're getting too excited here. We're getting a little amped up after only, two big wins, but it's hard not to, because we've been waiting and saying this for years, right?
I've never been amped. Like, this is fun. Like, I'm immersing myself in this fully. Like, even if it falls flat in its face and we don't win a game in the Olympics, like, the excitement, I'm jumping on the bandwagon, I'm getting in and I'm going full speed, because who knows if it happens again. Like, I'm hoping this is the building to something. And when going back to the dream team thing, the reason why I say that is there was a time in, the US where the best players played, right? To establish themselves as a world power. Now I find Team USA is more of a rite of passage. Like the younger guys getting the chance and trying to hold that torch, and they're a little more motivated maybe because, they don't want to be that Team USA that didn't win. And, Canada's at the point where it's like, no, we need all our best players still. Like, we can't be putting out our second tier guys and hoping to compete. So that's why, I'm jumping on this. Like, this is a team, as you said, I hope Wiggins and, Murray are eligible and able to play come Olympic time when it gets to that point, because I am going to be all in on that, like all in. Regardless, if it like I am going to immerse myself and take in any upset or any disappointment, I'm going to relish in that too because their expectation was there realistically where it wasn't before.
Well, before Shelly hops back on Twitter, Joey, I think it's time.
I think it's time.
I think it's
time too. We have to bring in the one, the only voice of the Bulls and our generation's voice of the Raptors and the voice of the CEBL, Chuck Swirsky. Bring out the salami and cheese, mama, because we have the one, the only. Is Taylor Allen tearing up? It's just the onions, baby onions, because we have the voice of now the Chicago Bulls, one time the Toronto Raptors, and now the national voice of the CEBL on TSN, Chuck Swirsky. Chuck, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We are so thrilled to have you on.
Well, thank you. I mean, it was a fantastic weekend in Quebec City, and I'm looking forward to 2024 already. I love the league, and I love the season we had.
Where do you find the rest? You just finished your season in Chicago, then you're traveling back and forth across the country. That's one thing you never really got to do, I guess, with the Raptors, is going to all these cities across the country. Must have been a little difficult, no?
No, you know what? I will never complain because, number one, I love the country. Canada, as you know, I'm a Canadian citizen, and it was great meeting so many people that watch Raptor ball 15, 20, 25 years ago, who have stayed with the franchise, which is awesome, and their passion for the team. But going into whether it was Vancouver or Edmonton or Winnipeg, and then going east, it was a delight. It really was. And I didn't mind it. You will never hear me complain at all.
Chuck, I've heard you say before that leaving Toronto, leaving the Raptors was the hardest decision you've ever made in your professional career. So now that you get to, come back and still call some games in Canada while staying with the Bulls, of course, I can't even imagine what that's meant to you. But how did this opportunity come up? Who reached out to you and how did it all come together?
Well, John Lashway, who used to be the head of public relations, vice president of the Raptors, when I first joined the ball club in 1998. So he reached out about, I would say maybe 5-6 months ago, wanted to know whether or not I was interested in doing a reunion game with Jack Armstrong. And I said, absolutely. Jack unfortunately had a lot of things going on this summer, so he couldn't make it. But I told John, I said, listen, you know what? My whole canvas is blank for the summer. So if you've got me for one game, 5 games, whatever the case may be, he came back with a proposal, and it was the game of the week. And I'll tell you what, as soon as the game was over, I was already looking forward to the following week. And we got off to such a great start. Kadre Gray hit a jumper to win it for Ottawa, and then it just steamrolled, and it was great.
Yeah, Kadri Gray from my alma mater, Laurentian University. He had a heck of a season out there in Ottawa. That said, what is it about this game? I mean, it is a little bit different than it is in the NBA with target score and everything else. But what was it about the CEBL that tied you in?
Well, it's a great question. And I'm going to be very transparent about this. And I told Mike Morreale, the co-founder and commissioner, who's doing a great, great job. I mean, a fantastic person, first and foremost. But when the CEBL, I really didn't know that much about it. And I'm going to be very upfront about this. I couldn't tell you players from Ottawa to Vancouver to Edmonton to the Niagara River lines. But as I became familiar with the league and the personnel, the one thing that really stands out, especially for the Canadian players, the pride they have for their country, our country, and the fact is they're so thrilled about hooping at home during the summer months. And they have friends, they have family, not only at the venue, but also watching on TSN, watching on CEBL.ca, you name it. And so when you put that pride together, and then you're competing against players either at the university level or you grew up with them as kids, the truth of the matter is they want to win badly. And that's the thing that always reminded me week after week after week how competitive these games are.
Chuck, this is more of a statement than a question. But growing up following the Raptors, it wasn't always easy being a Raptors fan. In the Chuck Swirsky era, there was sadly quite a few lean years, which I don't need to remind you of. But despite that, though, it almost kind of didn't even matter. It was still so much fun following this team because you made it fun. Guys like Jamario Moon and Derek Martin and Matt Bonner, maybe these guys weren't superstars, but you made these guys feel larger than life. And when they did have a big moment, it just felt like it felt even bigger. So really, just as someone who grew up a Raptors fan, I want to thank you for making that time memorable, fun, even though they basically, it was a miracle if they made it to the playoffs or were even the 8th seed. So
Yeah, you're very kind. Obviously, the players are the stars. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. It's funny you should mention this because in the semifinal game, that Calgary prevailed over Vancouver in a great game. I mean, from the opening tip, both teams got after it big time. So on the off day between the semifinal games and the final games, of course, the teams are practicing, the two teams respectively moving on with Calgary and Scarborough. So after practice, I went up to Seth Smith, who hit the game-winning shot. And I introduced myself, and he goes, "You don't need to introduce yourself. I used to watch you as a kid." And he goes, I said, like, have you heard the last call then from the game last night? He said, "Oh, yes." And he said it was great having your voice to it. And so, I mean, those things are special to me. But what I want to do is enhance what the league is already about. I mean, I listen, this was a great invitation. I hope I'm back next year. That remains to be seen what direction the league's going to go. That's out of my control. I want to be back. I hope to be back. But, if this was just a one and done, I had a fantastic journey through learning the league, learning players, understanding things like FIBA rules, which I'm not really exposed to at the NBA level or even college level when I did DePaul and the University of Michigan, understanding target time, understanding what it goes into target time from a strategic standpoint. And I learned so much from Joe Razzo. I mean, the people I work with Joe and Paul Jones and Amy Audebert and our sideline reporters, Nikki Reyes and Heather Morrison and, Dee Balsara. I mean, they are so gifted and they know exactly what's happening. I learned so much from that group. And to be around like Joe Razzo, I call him the czar of Canadian basketball, and it's true. I mean, if you ask Joe, tell me about Meshach Lufile. Well, I'll tell you what, he loves juicy fruit gum, and he bought a pack in the 3rd grade. I mean, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I mean, I'm exaggerating that obviously, but I mean, he knows these players. And so I'm just like, I put the ball on the tee or the ball near the rim and I let him slam dunk it.
You know what? To add on to that, to Joe Razzo, just how much he knows about it. In university, I played lacrosse, and my roommate was on the basketball team. Well, then turns out his dad, my roommate's dad, was his roommate back in university.
Wow.
So then I say like, oh, my old roommate Mark says hi. He's like, oh yeah, and he's like, oh, how's Snake doing? He's like, weren't they off at a camp? And he knows everything going on with these people. I'm like, it's like an encyclopedic memory on steroids. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
I can talk to that guy for hours.
And you know what? It is amazing. And he does a magnificent job. And I'll tell you what, having been with him for the majority of games this year, I just marveled at his basketball intelligence, the way he treats people. You will not meet a finer person, especially someone who is as passionate about basketball in Canada than Joe.
Yeah. And also, I just want to tag on to what, you were talking about with Taylor there. Do you feel there's a sense of, I don't want to say responsibility, but do you welcome that kind of stewardship with basketball in Canada? Because when you were here in Winnipeg, everybody knows who you are, right? And you haven't called a Raptors game in 15 years now.
Yep.
But there's a whole generation that you were the voice when the Raptors really became a part of Canadian culture, right? Like the Vince Carter era when really people started getting into it. And I was very impressed with how you gave time to everybody to take pictures, and you were sharing it on Twitter and these things, and it really kind of added to the experience, as opposed to, like, take away, like, you still put the game first. Do you feel that responsibility? Do you welcome that responsibility of being that face of Canadian basketball from that broadcast perspective?
Well, I mean, I don't consider myself the face. I think the sport itself has evolved to the point, because if you remember when the Raptors first came in, usually when people attended games at Skydome and then the Air Canada Center, then known as the Air Canada Center, well, Vince, his rookie year was the first year of the Air Canada Center. And so things kind of tied in with my call of Air Canada Carter. When he was slam dunk, Air Canada Carter. I mean, it was like, you talk about being at the right place at the right time. It was a perfect storm for Vince. Vince Sanity, or Tracy McGrady, where he shortened his last name, T-Mac to the rack, count it, in a foul, or Chris Bosh, instead of, oh my gosh, and oh my Bosh, or the Bosh pit,
This is nostalgia central right now.
Yeah. Well, all I'm saying is that, so, when we would go into different cities and people would recognize me and they'd want to talk, early Raptor, or they would watch the games on TSN. To me, it's the ultimate compliment, because, listen, people are going out of their way to attend the game, to watch the game. And then if I happen to be there, it's saying, oh, that's the guy that was on TV, or that's the guy that was always promoting the Raptors or promoting the sport. So I learned as much about them and their love for basketball as they probably took from a conversation or a picture. And one thing is that it's great to have a relationship with the game itself, because the game itself is so beautiful. And you're seeing so many young kids, girls and boys, who have gravitated to the sport, who want their parents involved as coaches or helping out. And instead of handing out oranges for soccer, for example, they're now saying, hey, what can we do to enhance my son or my daughter's basketball at grade 3? And so I just think that everything has come together. All of this, it didn't happen overnight, but the foundation is really solid, as we saw in Winnipeg, as we saw in Quebec City, as we saw in Montreal, as we saw championship weekend. People in Vancouver were great. We went to Niagara, and then Scarborough and Brampton with the rivalry. It's crazy. And that's why I can't wait for Quebec City to get a team. Their rivalry with Montreal is going to be off the charts. It's going to be so healthy for the league. And then you're going to have Ottawa in the mix. And already out west, you can see and sense what's going on with the rivalry between a number of teams. And so I think it's going to really make this sport even better.
Well, I think that Quebec one you were talking about, the cool thing about that is they haven't had that rivalry since the Quebec Nordiques left in the NHL.
Correct.
Right? And like that was when I was quite young. I still remember them, but I don't think I fully appreciated that rivalry. And that's what I'm interested in seeing once the league expands there, to see, when it becomes Montreal against Quebec. It's more than the sport, right? And
Yes,
that's what I love about Quebec in any sport. Their passion out there for fan base goes well beyond the sport. It's part of their cultural fabric.
Absolutely, 100%.
Chuck, I have to ask. I know you've told this story a million times as to where you got the idea for the "Get Out the Salami and Cheese, Mama" call that you made at the end of games with your time in Toronto. But the fan that wrote the letter, have you ever had a chance to meet this fan or speak to this fan since this thing took off?
Never. And it's,
really?
Yeah, and you know what? I don't know. Well, I know the history behind the letter, because it was a letter that he said, listen, I'm into every Raptor game, and I'm on the edge of my seat. I can't leave. And yet, I'm just starving at the end of a game. It's 2.5, 3 hours, whatever the case may be. So when you think the Raptors have put this game away, can you just say, hey, Raptors in the win column, or, you can grab something to eat. He goes, by the way, Chuck, I like salami and cheese. So I'm saying, wow, okay. So the next game, the Raptors are in front by like 8 points with about 22 seconds to go. And it just it popped in my brain and said, get out the salami and cheese, mama. This ball game is over. And Dan Gladman, who's actually producing CEBL, he says in my headset, where obviously the viewer couldn't listen, he says, Chuck, what did you just say? And I hit the mute button. I said, I'll let you know after the game what's going on. So the next day, the switchboard lights up, oh, the salami and cheese. And then they started bringing, signs to the game, to the point where when Sam Mitchell, before that, Kevin O'Neill, but really it was Sam during that period, when the Raptors were up big and the subs started coming in with 3 minutes to go in the game or whatever, the players would always give me a wink. Have you called it?
Well, I think next time you're in Toronto, you got to find that fan. You guys got to go out for lunch, have a nice salami and cheese sandwich,
Well,
and
now you're going to probably have 1,000 people say, "Hey, I'm that guy who."
And Joey and I will be the first ones to do that.
We'll have to match the signatures on the letter for sure. That said, in Toronto, as it is for most major sports, Toronto ends up being kind of the national team, right? Outside of the CFL and in the NHL, Toronto kind of stands as Canada's team for a lot of things. And, as a local broadcaster, you're kind of a national broadcaster. In that sense, I mean, what's the biggest difference when you go from a market like Toronto to a market like Chicago? Similar in size, but I imagine totally different in terms of broadcast
Absolutely.
consistency.
Well, because honestly, I just want a good game. When I do a national broadcast, if Calgary had defeated Scarborough, Calgary wins the game. I mean, I didn't go in saying, boy, I really hope this team wins, or I would really like to see this happen, because I have a responsibility for the integrity of the game. So having put together a situation where you have a brief time with coaches, you introduce yourself to players. And again, all this was new to me. I didn't know one coach in the CEBL. And I introduced myself, picked their brains about their ideology and their basketball foundation and where and how they saw the game, how they saw target time, for example. And so I think because of that, it actually helped me be a better broadcaster without having an agenda. Because when I was doing the Raptors like the Bulls, I've got a responsibility, and I hold myself accountable, number one, to call the game. And that means not only for the Bulls, but also for the opposing team. And if the opposing team makes a great play, you got to say, great play. And it never is personal, by the way, for a contest. Never. And so the way I look at the CEBL broadcast, if there was a huge play, a huge dunk, I got just as excited for Team A as I did for Team B. And I think the emails I received after a game from viewers who loved, the Alliance, or loved the Blackjacks, or really got into the Shooting Stars, at least from that standpoint, it became very apparent that they knew that I had their back, that it wasn't one-sided, and it wasn't just some type of 90% on one side, 10% on the other, because I don't think it makes for a very good broadcast. I really don't. Even during my days with the Raptors, and I was doing Get Out Salami and Cheese and Raptors win, Raptors win. Truth of the matter is, if you saw the entirety of a game and the volume of the opening tip to the end of a game, we went really, in my opinion, we went to extreme efforts to make sure that the viewer understood we have a game to call. And while we didn't necessarily go overboard on the opposing team, we did give that team total respect. And, I think one thing is that I think as the new wave of broadcasters, whether they're in the CEBL, whether they're in the G League, or when they enter the NBA, they come to realize very quickly that from a viewer standpoint, from a listening standpoint, uh, it probably is not healthy to sugarcoat and just go really overboard when you call the game for one specific club. I think you do. I want the Bulls to win? Absolutely. Is it more exciting when they win? 100%. But when the Bulls play the Celtics, for example, and Jason Tatum is going off and he is hitting every shot and it's contested, or Jaylen Brown is, popping in, mid-range jumpers, and the Bulls are doing their very best to defend him, you got to tip your hat to these guys. I mean, these are exquisite, elite NBA talent. So it would be foolish on my part if I tried to bring those players down instead of telling our viewers and listeners back in Chicago what really is happening, that you're looking at greatness. You're looking at a player who has taken over this game. And, hey, listen, more power to him. That's the way I look at it.
I appreciate you using the Celtics as the example there, as a guy growing up a Celtics fan. But on that note, there's a lot of people in that market that probably cheer for the team you're watching. Like, especially in Toronto, in Winnipeg, there's plenty of Minnesota Timberwolves fans.
Absolutely.
And when that game's on TV, that's one of the few games you get, unless you have, NBA Game Pass and things like that. And if you're getting emails complimenting you on balance, that's really good, because rarely on Twitter do you can see the most balanced call and everybody thinks they're favoring the other team.
Yeah. No, well, and again, because this was, and listen, if I come back, and I hope to come back, and again, we talked about that, who knows, but if I come back for year two, that it'll be more of the same. I mean, to me, I walk into that venue and, we always make sure we go out of our way to let the audience know that these players are here to hoop, that they have no other agenda than to win. It's a 20-game season. They can't take possessions off. They can't take games off. And so they bring it every single night. You look at box scores in the CEBL, very rarely, seldom does it happen, and it happens on occasion, but for most part, these games are critically acclaimed because they're very close in the process. They really are. And I think that, I think that's the beauty of the target score. I really didn't know the target score other than, the NBA All-Star game. And the target score really has opened my eyes quite a bit. I love it.
I've heard you say in interviews that you would actually be open to that, being a rule in the NBA. Is that true?
I'll tell you what, I would be open to it, with the caveat that I think for playoff games, once postseason starts, I'd probably lift it. And I know people are going to say, well, wait a minute, you did 82 games, now you're lifting. But strategy changes quite a bit in postseason. It really does. And you can look at any sport. Coaches start pulling back rotations. Coaches start to tinker with a schematic process of how they're lining up a certain, whether it's a line in hockey or whether it's a pitching staff in baseball. So I like the target score. I would keep definitely the target score in this league, especially because I think now that the fans have a taste of it, it really has brought, and you can tell by the vibe in the crowd, they really, really enjoy it.
Chuck, I have a random question for you. I have a theory that Andrea Bargnani was ahead of his time. And that if he was playing today with all the tall guys that could shoot and whatnot, he would be a hot commodity in the NBA. But I wanted to run that theory by you, but also ask you, do you have a favorite Andrea Bargnani story?
Well, let's see. Let's start with that story, and then we'll talk about Andrea coming into the league. So, my favorite Andrea Bargnani story is that I believe we were in New York, and Ray Chow, the team massage therapist, who's now with Atlanta, myself and Andrea went out for dinner. And the next morning, and you can check this, I believe it was New York. I could be wrong. I believe it was New York, but don't hold me to that because it was quite some time ago. But so the next morning, we're on the team bus and I don't see Andrea. And so we get to the arena and I thought maybe he had taken the early bus, maybe he's gotten some shots, maybe he's coming on a later bus with other players. And they said, well, he had an appendectomy last night. I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. I had dinner with him. And I'm trying to think what he had, did I have, and boom. And it's, I mean, I can tell that story with a smile. Now, I, obviously I went to our trainer and said, listen, full disclosure, I was with him last night. And he goes, no, Chuck, you're good. This happened really early in the morning and we had to make sure something was going on. And if you remember, he missed like a month and a half. But let me tell you something about Andrea. Andrea, he was, a guy, number one pick in the draft. I think coming over to the States, it was a blur. And I did vote for him Rookie of the Year. I was the only media member to do so. Brandon Roy would have been a unanimous selection. And I'm going to tell you something that I've never shared with anyone, so you have an exclusive. I felt a lot of internal pressure because I do know that Brandon Roy had a better rookie year than Andrea, no question. But I saw Andrea play the entire season, and I know what he did for 2 months as a rook. Without those 2 months, the Raptors don't make the playoffs in 2007. Simple as that. They needed to win some games, and he helped them win some games. And I didn't see Brandon Roy play every game, but I know what he did. I mean, everyone knows what he did. That's why he was a near unanimous Rookie of the Year. So I felt internally that I had to do my part as an employee and also as somebody who saw him play to vote for him. I took a lot of criticism. I got killed in the national media in the United States. I got, some nasty, nasty correspondence from people in Portland, and I own it. I voted for him. Had I been in any other market, would I have voted for Andrea Bargnani? Probably not. But because I was in Toronto and also understood, that he's one of us, so to speak, I voted for him. And at the time, and again, let's keep in mind with the frame that we're looking at, the timeline. In 2007, where everything was going with the Raptors making the playoffs and having a big run, and I still maintain to this day, had Calderon not underthrown that pass to Bosch, had that been an over-the-top pass, and again, we could go shoulda, coulda, woulda, until we're blue in the face on everything in sport and in life. But in Game 6, had he not underthrown that pass and put it over the top where Bosch could have just caught the ball and dunked it, and we go to Game 7 in Toronto, no way the Nets win that game. No way they win that Game 7 in Toronto. None. And then who knows what happens after that? Who knows? But I'm just saying that was the story of 2007.
That's kind of a what if like a very big what if time. Like just, from the play to both Bargnani and Brendan Roy, like the Portland Trailblazers to me, like that's the what if team of my generation. Right.
Yes.
You look at the Greg Oden situation, Brandon Roy, they've had so many players come in that were supposed to be game changers and just,
Well, the
didn't pan out.
double-digit lead over the Lakers. I mean, in the playoff game, and
Mhm.
they squandered that lead in the fourth quarter. I mean, you. I mean, Portland had they had a lot of issues, as we know. Okay, but player-wise, talent-wise, they were really, really good, very good.
Ah, they were so good. Well, we could go on forever, but I'm sure you have other things to do. Are you ready for target time?
I look, bring it on.
Who was your favorite player to interact with on the Toronto Raptors during your time in Toronto?
My favorite player. Well, that's not a very good question because I'll tell you what. Well, it's a great question, but it's a tough question to answer. How's that? Because there are so many wonderful people to interact with, and so if I gave you one, it would be a disservice to so many.
Okay.
That's a cop out, but it's the truth.
What if I went Chicago? Because I know that you and Joakim Noah were you were pretty
Joakim,
fun of him.
yeah, I love Joe. Joe would probably rank right up there, but again, there are some, let's do it this way. The criteria when I say an interesting player or a player out there, they don't necessarily have to be very gregarious. They could be kind of like just, not really a great interview, but a very interesting person without the mic in front of their face, where you can have some really good talks about things. And I've been blessed to really have a lot of great relationships with players who are not comfortable in front of the media. That doesn't mean they're bad people. They just don't like to share their life story with someone, or they have, they kind of like their lifestyle is such that they were never exposed to this as a kid. And now all of a sudden, even in college for 1 year, they started having people ask them a bunch of questions and they feel uncomfortable. And so they really have that kind of like low vibe, but they're really good people.
All right. 0 for 1, swing and a miss for Joey. Taylor, you're up.
Please struck him out of a cold ball.
Well, before I get to mine, I just wanted to say I did see that it sounds like you and the late great Kobe Bryant though kind of had a pretty good relationship before games and whatnot. Was there an interaction with him that really kind of sticks out, or your favorite moment with him?
Well, I mean, so I was introduced to Kobe by his agent, now the Lakers GM, Rob Pelinka, and Rob and I called Michigan games together. And Rob is an unbelievable human being. And so from that point on, every time, in fact, when Kobe scored 81, the next year, the first time the Lakers played the Raptors, I asked to interview Kobe for the pregame. And of course, the Lakers PR people said, no. And Rob picked up the phone and got it done. And we interviewed Kobe 90 minutes before the tip at Staples with Lakers and Raptors about, that whole 81-point game. And this is the first time you've played the Raptors. What was it like as you reflect? I mean, he was awesome. And every time we spoke, he always went out of his way. I mean, every Raptor game, every Bulls game, he went out of his way. We'd spend about 5 minutes. We wouldn't even talk hoops, And sometimes we talk about Rob and what a great influence Rob has on his life. Sometimes you just wanted to know about things, what's going on in Chicago. How do you like Canada? And I mean, he was just an incredible person. The last time I saw him was his last game in Chicago against the Bulls. And we took a walk down the concourse, and he said, "This isn't the last time we're going to talk." Unfortunately, it was. But he said, "How much longer you want to do this?" And I said, "Until the Bulls tell me you're done." And he goes, "That's awesome." He goes, "I know how much you love the game. You love the game as much as I loved it." And so that was it.
Crazy.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I was able to squeeze that question in there because I really wanted to ask you about that. But my first official target time question for you, though, would be, who's the most underrated Raptor of the Chuck Swirsky era? Maybe a guy who just didn't get as much love as, the guys like Vince Carter, Bosch, and whatnot. Who's the most underrated guy, you think?
The most underrated Raptor. I'm going to say Alvin Williams. I think, honestly, here's the thing. I think Alvin Williams brought so much to the organization. Here's a guy. I mean, if somebody told me when Alvin Williams was playing that he would be the lead analyst on Raptor TV, I would have said, you're nuts. And it's not because Alvin wasn't intelligent or articulate or knowledgeable. He's all that and more. But when the game was over, everyone went to Vince or everyone went to other players. Alvin was very much of a mastermind. He was always thinking about the game, basketball IQ off the charts, but he wasn't one that sought the mic or publicity. But I'll tell you what, he left everything on the floor every single night. He didn't need to score 15 to 20 for the Raptors to win. He won with his defense, his toughness, his basketball IQ, his deflections, everything. And I don't think he was appreciated enough. And here's what I've said this many, many times. Of course, the Raptors never took me up on it. I wish they had. I would have done a yearly award when his career had ended, the Heart and Hustle Alvin Williams Award, yearly award, that goes to the Raptor who symbolizes what Alvin Williams brought the ball club. And every year, I don't know who votes on it. I don't know, they can worry about that, but I think they should have done that. And because I really think he laid the foundation for what a Raptor should be all about. That's just my opinion.
I like that. Very well said.
That was a great.
Listen, is he the greatest Raptor of all time? No. That's going to go to Lowry or DeRozan or Carter. That they can sort those things out. But I'm just saying, you have to keep in mind the perspective of the history of the Raptors and players who signified certain elements and moments that got the Raptors to the point where they became relevant, because fans would watch the other team. They come into Sky Dome or the Air Canada Center. Hey, the Lakers are in town. Hey, the Bulls are in town. Hey, the Celtics are in town. And, oh, by the way, who's number 22 for the Raptors? Let me look at my program. Seriously. And so, but if you look at different players, whether it was Stoudemire who got it going early with his scoring, but then you have, Vince, and you had Tracy, and then you had Bosch, and of course then the championship season. But you get guys who brought it so much, like Alvin, and that's why I wish the franchise would have recognized Alvin for a window of time, that now the history, so players who never saw Alvin Williams play, or probably you get a kid that's drafted now, they've heard of Vince Carter, they've heard of Chris Bosh, they've heard of Tracy McGrady, they've heard of Kawhi Leonard, all those things, but I want them to say, hey, tell me about Alvin Williams. Tell me, I know he's our broadcaster, did he play? And how long did he play here? And what did he do? Give these young people a history of some of the players that really made Raptor ball. Mo Peterson, okay? Mo Pete, same thing. Mo Pete, outstanding two-way player. Anthony Parker, 18 Parkerville Court. He owned the right corner. That was his thing. We're going to give you that space, and you're going to shoot the three. We're going to do a lot of draw and kicks, and just be ready to catch the ball and shoot, because that's what you do really, really well. And that's because when he would knock down three, and that's why he owned that territory, and that was his little residence, and that's why I called on the floor 18, his jersey number, 18 Parkerville Court.
See,
And now he's a GM somewhere. Anthony
Orlando.
Parkhurst.
In
Yes,
fact-
yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I just got a text from him about 7 hours ago.
Oh wow.
That's awesome.
Okay.
That's a true
That's
story.
super cool.
But you're right though, with like just to put a cap on Alvin Williams, like growing up in high school, like he was a guy that we all liked, like we were huge fans. But he's kind of become one of those oh shoot yeah players, as in oh shoot yeah he was on the Raptors. Like he didn't like stay in the memory as fresh as some of the other guys. Like even Mo Pete kind of supersedes him when you look back at the Raptors guys. So that's interesting. Okay, this is kind of a bit away from basketball now, Chuck.
Okay.
From the time you moved away from Canada, is there a favorite treat? Because there are differences between the treats here in Canada
Yes.
and the U.S. Is there anything, it could be whether it's candy, chips, food, that you miss or need to get when you're back in Canada that you miss now that you're in Chicago?
Well, I mean, Dairy Queen is here, so I get my blizzards. I used to get my blizzards on Appleby Line from DQ.
In Burlington.
Burlington.
Yeah,
I love Burlington. I love the DQ. I mean, I would go in there. I just light it up, man. It was great.
I know exactly which one you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. You know what I miss? I miss the Mandarin.
Okay.
Oh, the oranges, little peelable oranges.
Nope.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the restaurant or the fruit?
The restaurant.
Oh, okay. Never
Yeah.
mind.
I don't know if that's Canadian. I think it might only be in Ontario, but it's basically like a buffet, right? Like
Yeah,
a
and it
Chinese
was
food
awesome.
buffet.
I
Yeah.
would go in with the kids, and I mean, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, look at this. But I mean, it was one of our treats. We go bowling, and then we go to the Mandarin.
Nice. Nice.
So I
Okay.
miss that. I miss everything about Canada.
Joey's the Ontario guy on the podcast. I'm just the Manitoban guy. So I
No,
didn't
no,
know. I didn't know what the Mandarin was. My
But
fault.
here's the
Sorry.
thing. No, I'll tell you what. We went when we were in Winnipeg. I actually took a picture of the Dale Howardchuk statue, and that was really cool. Rest
Awesome.
his soul. The GM of the Jets, Kevin Shovelday,
Shovel
Shovel
day
day
off.
off. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
he was with the Chicago Wolves of the AHL, and then he joined the Blackhawks.
Yep.
And Blackhawks loved him. And he's done a pretty good job with the Jets. I mean, and so, but I'll tell you what, Winnipeg, they love their sports. I mean, the owner, David, is it Adler? Is that
David Asper.
Asper? I'm sorry, Asper. My bad, Asper. He is like off the charts great. He is engaging. He's very charismatic, and I mean, like he was in Quebec for this clash, and I spoke to him, and so we were having a talk about the city, and I know that Mike Morreale, the commissioner and co-founder, is very tight with the head coach, Mike O'Shea. And so, because they played together.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yeah.
and so Winnipeg's having a good year, right? In the CFL?
They've been they're in a
9-2 right now.
Verge of a-
33,000 fans were
verge
there
of
on
a-
Thursday.
That's
verge of a
awesome.
dynasty there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, maybe we'll stick with another food question here, Chuck.
Yeah.
If you're constructing the perfect salami and cheese sandwich, how you doing it? What's the bread? What's the cheese? What's the sauce? What
Well, I
else
mean,
is on there?
Number one, you have to go with a little Italian bread. I mean, you got to have it. Okay.
Classic.
Okay. So then, what you do is you bathe the interior of the Italian bun in a little maybe marinara sauce, but not too thick because you want to really enjoy the salami and cheese. So you bathe it a little bit, just a little bit of a coat, and then you sprinkle on the Parmesan and the mozzarella, a combination of both, just not one, but both. Okay. And then what you do is you put a little bit of hot pepper, but not a lot, but a little bit of hot pepper, just, just sprinkle it on. And then you start saying, okay, we're going to lay down the salami. And then on top of that, if you really want to get creative, you can put maybe a little lettuce, a little tomato, and make yourself a sandwich. You add a little bit more cheese, You cover it up one more time with a layer of salami, marinara sauce. Boom.
And that is your Swirsky signature salami and cheese
There you
sandwich
go.
recipe. That was awesome.
They need to start selling that at Raptors games.
Well,
That'd be a
if
huge hit.
If I ever come back to Canada, which who knows, but if I ever return, I am going to market that, and I'm also going to market because I make chocolate chip cookies, and we're going to call them Chuck's Chips.
Love it.
Swirsky salami and cheese. Yeah,
Sign me up.
put that down with Chuck's chocolate chips. Man, you've got it all figured out, man. This post broadcasting career might even be more fruitful than the broadcasting
know
one.
about
Jeepers. All right. This is a Chicago question.
Yes.
And I might be wrong, but as far as I know, these are like the big two: Giordano's or Lou Malnati's for Chicago deep dish pizza.
Lou Malnati's.
That's what I was told. I was told the real people.
And there are hundreds of great pizza places. Pisano's, another great place. I mean, you could go into any neighborhood, a tavern, and it doesn't necessarily have to be deep dish, although that's what Chicago's known for. But there are so many best kept secrets in Chicago regarding pizza. But you offered me a choice between the two.
Well, I figured that would be it, because as you being there in Chicago, being from there, that would be like you would know all the.
And full disclosure, I know Mark Malnati very well.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's
So
awesome.
there you go.
So you've had a slice or two from there. Fair enough.
I have. Yes, I have.
I wanted to ask you, who would your dream color commentator partner be? If you could call one game and you could choose anyone, whether they're still with us or not, who would your dream partner be?
I could do that because they're all different and they're all good. So I can't take one because number one, it's a really the uniqueness of a color commentator is the fact that everyone has a different personality, just like play-by-play announcers. I mean, so I respect them all. They do an unbelievable job. And it's just like saying, okay, who's your favorite Raptor or favorite Bull? I really, honestly, I don't have one.
Is there someone that you looked up to maybe on the color commentary side that,
I look
you
up
might
to
not
all because they either played or they coached or they did something to put them in a position where they were hired to be an analyst.
Okay.
Okay, Joey said we both have a strike now, so now we're even.
all right.
We got two. Can't have another one.
All right. Chuck,
Yes.
do onions make you cry?
No, they do not.
Wow.
Well,
We could put little onions on the salami and cheese sandwich. I like that. Thank you.
Well, this question might make you cry because it might make me cry just thinking about what could have been if Tracy McGrady did not leave, and you're shaking your head already. Yeah, I feel you. If Tracy McGrady did not leave the Toronto Raptors, where does that team go? Do they win a ring eventually?
I think they get to the possibility of winning the ring. Obviously, we don't know what would have happened during that period of time going up against the Lakers. But I do think had they stayed together, they would have won multiple Eastern Conference championships. And then you never know. Players, as the popularity of Toronto sports took off with Vince and Tracy together, you'd have players come in and say to themselves, you know what? We love Toronto. These two guys are locked in long term, and we're going to just hitch on to the wagon and we're rolling right to the NBA Finals. But we'll never know, unfortunately. But I do think they would have won multiple Eastern Conference titles.
Another big what if.
Yeah. I've heard even Kobe speak about that. I've heard him even say that was a big what if. If T-Mac stayed in Toronto, that would have been a team to watch out for. So
100%.
yeah, that's one of the biggest what ifs in Raptors history, sadly.
Yeah. And I bet you T-Mac in his quiet moments thinks the same way.
Yeah.
But he wanted to go back home. And I think, his final two decisions as far as where to go, it was Chicago and Orlando. And at that point, Orlando was bringing in Grant Hill. And then, of course, Hill had the ankle injury and wasn't a factor. And Tracy basically, looked around and said, I'm heading to Houston. And all I can tell you is his second season, especially we got swept by the Knicks in the first ever playoff appearance by the Raptors against New York. They lost 3-0. But let me tell you what, that set the foundation for McGrady's career. And I mean, just to see Tracy McGrady play and do what he did, and it was unbelievable. I'll tell you, his first year didn't play a lot. Second year, we went 23-27 in the lockout year. Third year, when we went to the playoffs, his third year, and then he was a free agent. In those years, you were a free agent after 3 years. And so we'll never know.
Well, my last question, Taylor actually stole during the interview process, so I'll go to my backup.
You stole a question from me last week with Teddy, though, so I don't feel like that. So now we're even.
I like the internal bickering that goes on. You're not going to edit this out, are you?
No,
it's a weekly thing. It's a weekly thing.
Yeah. So since you took away my target score question, I guess we'll go with, what's the biggest difference between life in Toronto and life in Chicago for you?
Let's see. The biggest difference between, well, you don't have Donald Trump. Okay,
we're very thankful for that.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we'll say that's a wrap.
Who is that guy? I don't even know who he is.
Oh, yeah. Well, before we wrap, though, we do have our 10th and final one, not Donald related. If you were building the all-time Raptors starting five, sorry, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but if you're building the all-time Raptors starting five, Chuck, who is it?
Well, how about just the 5 best players?
Sure, okay. That works. Yeah.
That's what we're going to see next year. You know, in the NBA, you just take the 5 best players instead of an all NBA, center forwards, whatever. So, I mean, you have to take the obvious, right? You got to take DeMar and Kyle Lowry. Got to take those 2 to start, okay? And then after you get those 2, to me, you have to take Bosch, and you have to take Vince, and you have to take McGrady.
McGrady, okay.
McGrady,
Carter, wait a minute, Carter, Bosch, right?
Yeah.
DeMar, along with Kyle Lowry, and the 5th person, who did I say? I said the
McGrady.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Second thought, probably not McGrady. My question is, like, I can't put Kawhi Leonard, although without Leonard, I don't see. Here's the thing: do I think the Raptors win the title without Kawhi Leonard? And my take is this: I think DeMar DeRozan wins that championship.
Yeah,
I do. I really do. I love DeMar. I can't. DeMar's headed to the Hall of Fame, and people can say Kawhi Leonard. Okay, well, how many games did he play? And now he showed up, he hit that shot, but that ball bounced around the rim. If he doesn't hit that shot, then what happens?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of really, in between players, we're missing a lot of players. So
and that's the tough part, right? Because even Kawhi Leonard, there is that argument that people will say he is the greatest because he is the determining factor that changed to that. And I don't know. I think with the one thing for that that I liked about that move was it was tough for fans because everybody loved DeMar DeRozan. The guy wanted to be a Raptor for life, and was really immersed himself in the organization. But that was the one big move that the Raptors did where it was like, we have to make a hard decision to be a championship team. And I think that was my biggest knock on them before that was there wasn't that championship caliber to it. There was something missing.
Oh, no, listen. And Masai, you want to mess with Masai because this guy is all about winning. And it's a business, I get it. And he made a very bold move, and it was very unpopular, but it worked. And so, right now you got the Larry O'Brien Trophy in Toronto.
And against Golden State, I know Kevin Durant goes down, but that was not a team like the 04 Pistons that weren't expected to win a championship. That was a team that's in the midst of a dynasty with the best players in the world, and they went toe to toe and beat them in Golden State. That was Like, that championship was earned. I have to say, by the organization, for sure.
But with that said, though, as exciting and, as amazing as it was to see Toronto win, one of my first thoughts was, oh man, DeMar. Like for years, right? The first 20 years of the franchise history, it was okay. The Raptors get a star, then the star leaves, and then we get one in DeMar, and he's the one guy that says, "No, I want to stay here. I want to play my whole career here." And then that's the guy that they send packing. It's kind of felt like they had to sell their soul to the devil almost in a way to get that ring and make a trade and send him out of town. So it was a little bittersweet in that regard. But Kawhi, the 1 year that he did have in Toronto, I mean, my goodness, that's something we'll be talking about forever. So, but yeah, I see both sides for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, we took the long way around, but that does conclude Target Time. There's no clock and target time, right? So maybe that's the difference between rapid fire. But Chuck, thank you so much for taking the time, and we could have talked to you for hours. Thank you for carving out the time that you did. We do hope you're back next year, because it's been fun to have you back on the broadcast here in Canada and hearing it for our league, which is something that Taylor and I have talked about. It's opportunities for players, but it's opportunity for everybody, including some people that you named and myself that had a chance to, work basketball, which has been a lot of fun. And that didn't exist, 5+ years ago. So thank you for coming in and, doing that this year and being a part of the podcast. Has been an absolute blast.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Here, I got to ask this, though. If we're going to close out an interview with Chuck Swirsky, can we have Chuck Swirsky close it out?
Yeah. Get out the salami and cheese, mama. This podcast is over.
That was the greatest 5 seconds ever.
Thank you for listening to the Target Score Weekly podcast. To stay up to date with Winnipeg Sea Bears and CEBL news, as well as future episode releases, follow Joey and Taylor on Twitter and Instagram at TaylorAllen31 and at Joey Slattery TV. And wherever you're getting the podcast, be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode.